This is TWiT.
Some security news, some unfortunate security news. I'm super curious to hear your take on this. Wyze, which is, you're probably familiar with Wyze. We've talked about them on the network many times. We reviewed their products. And actually, I've felt like they make some pretty great smart home products, right? Yep. They make, security cameras. Yep. They make locks, like automatic locks for the doors, that sort of stuff. And it's always, I've felt in my exposure to Wyze, high enough quality. It's not like the top tier, but the quality is really good at an affordable price.
That's the thing. It was always something that was pretty affordable and where anybody can just sort of jump into it, because a lot of the stuff that's out there now from an IoT standpoint costs like $1 zillion and it's not worth it.
Or it's affordable and it's a piece of junk, or really poorly made, or really poorly supported. And it really seemed, Wyze is actually created by some ex-Amazon some people who were high up in Amazon. So it kind of had the foundation, I think it's a West Coast, based on the West Coast here in the States, had the foundations to be like, well, here's an inexpensive, a relatively inexpensive smart home manufacturer that makes quality products for less money than the rest, and they're supported well and all those things. Well, a pretty major vulnerability of the Wyze Cam, of which there are 3 different generations of the Wyze Cam, just to preface this, is now being publicized. It was reported and relatively unfixed after being reported by Bitdefender for 3 years. So Bitdefender publicly acknowledged just this week that it had notified Wyze of a serious issue with its cameras back in March of 2019. So 3 years ago, they said, hey, Wyze, we've found some issues. A couple of those issues. The main one is this vulnerability that allows access to an onboard SD card via the internet. No authentication required to get that access. Apparently, you plug in an SD card. It sets up some sort of way that somebody could access it if they knew how online without any authentication. That would give that person access to any video, audio, images that were stored there by the camera, but also any other files that the user might happen to put on the SD card, which I don't know how many users are doing that. But
everybody doesn't format their SD cards.
That's true. That's a good point. Okay, there you go.
For sure.
It's a really good point. You don't know what's on there. You put it in your camera.
You just slap it in there. So, here's an SD card sitting around. I can plug it in.
Yeah, right. I've got one of those. Here it is. Also storing log files. And that's important because those log files include the unique identification number and AES encryption key, which could lead to full remote access of the camera entirely.
Oh, joy.
All right. So that's all stored on the SD card. So Bitdefender reported that. They also reported 2 other vulnerabilities at the time. One, an authentication bypass flaw. That ultimately was patched in September 2019. So remember, these were reported March 2019. That was patched September 2019. The other, a remote execution vulnerability, which was patched November 2020. So that was, however many months, what is that? That's 16 months after being reported. The SD card flaw was only fixed this January, so almost 3 months later. In no cases did Wyze address these issues for its users publicly. And we're talking about a camera that is pointed at all sorts of things inside the home.
Oh, boy.
I mean, just bad. It's not good.
I had two things that popped in my head when I saw this article, and one of them is quite selfish. And that's when I saw it, it said version 1 for the camera, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't have a version 1 camera, so I just totally dismissed it, which is totally selfish. I get that, but then it was like, wait a minute, they said 3 years. And didn't do anything about it or say anything about this.
Didn't say anything about it.
That's also a problem.
Yeah, also, now you have the Wyze system, and I have a Wyze door lock. That's the only Wyze thing that I have. I have many Wyze things, but Wyze branded things, I only have the door lock. Yeah. And my understanding with the door lock is if I want to update the firmware, I have to do it manually. Yeah. So I have to open the app. I have to connect it to, make sure that it's connected properly to the lock. I have to update firmware, send it over. So this is all under the assumption that once they made that change, you with your camera then went in at some point, may have not been immediately because, well, you didn't know that the dang thing was,
exactly
in that state initially, but eventually you would go in and update your firmware, and until that happened, it was not updated.
You're not opening that camera app unless you see an alert that tells you to open it, because otherwise it's just sitting there running. At least for me, and when I see an alert that someone is walking across the yard, I'll open it up. Other than that, I don't think anything about those products. But why 3 years? And why not say anything? It makes no sense at all, and you can't throw the whole "it was COVID" blame on it. I don't want to hear any of that crap. You have all of the resources to work on these things remotely and get a fix in. And the people that are finding these bugs, they always respect the bounty and allow you plenty of time to go ahead and work it out before going public with it. So they tried to show you respect. You need to show respect to these consumers and get this stuff fixed in a timely manner, not just sit on it. Come on, Wyze, you're better than this, I thought.
I agree with you to an extent.
All right.
But Sean Hollister, who wrote for The Verge, really points out something, that's important to take a look at through a critical lens. Bitdefender waited 3 years to make this public too.
Good point.
They told Wyze about this back in March 2019. And they knew about this for 3 years. And at a certain point, it's kind of like, okay. Oh, and in fact, not only that, Bitdefender contacted Wyze in March 2019. They didn't actually get a response from Wyze until November 2020. That was 20 months later. So they knew about it. They never got that response.
Oh, boy.
So it's kind of also on them, right? Like, obviously, they weren't the ones that, created the Wyze camera.
It's as a whistleblower aspect, but it's still Wyze's product.
Absolutely.
Right?
No question. But I think the response on Bitdefender's side too is questionable. It's like, why did you wait this long? Like,
right. We'll say, okay, now, so what are the next steps? How are we going to educate consumers that this is something that we as consumers need to be aware of on a regular basis? Because again, I'm guilty of not checking my app unless that thing gives me a reason to open it.
Yeah. The company, why? And again, Sean Hollister points this out. He, up until this happened, he was a very proud user of Wyze, had all sorts of, their cameras. I don't know how many. In this article, he basically says they're in the trash now. Like, I've thrown them all away. Wyze, I'm never, supporting another one of your products. This is a bridge too far. But he says he would get emails from Wyze, and I'm sure we have gotten these emails. I haven't seen them. Maybe they go into like my promotions folder and I just don't see them. And he said, at first, when I got them, I actually really appreciated them because they were just like check-in emails from Wyze saying, hey, by the way, we've updated the firmware. So make sure and go into your app and update the firmware on your camera so that you're up to date on it, blah, blah, blah. And he said, at the time, I really appreciated those. Looking back now, knowing what I know, it feels kind of devious. It's kind of like, we're not going to tell you why, but let's just, paint a rosy picture here. They said, what did they say? Update the Wyze Cam firmware to be sure you are in tip-top shape so you can breathe easy and know Wyze has your back.
That's
smiley face,
That's the thing I've seen. And the thing is, they're not the only company guilty of that.
No.
You get a lot of stuff like that from some of the apps that you run on your smartphone. Hey, let's update the app for, quote, bug fixes.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily get into
what's
that
going
it
on
being a vulnerability that was patched or anything like that. It'll literally just say bug fixes. Adobe, I'm a proud Adobe user and authorized affiliate. Adobe is known for having some security issues. And when I get my little release of time to update this app, it always says performance issues and bug fixes. It never says, oh yeah, we had a hole that we need to patch. Go ahead and fix that now. Thanks.
Yeah. So why is that? Because I think, well, maybe there's a certain level of consumer who's less dialed into the day-to-day on technology products who would see that and be like, wow, they're completely insecure. But like, I'm a realist, I guess, in all this stuff, to where I understand that companies aren't going to release a product. Like, hopefully they've done their due diligence, right, to make sure that their product is as safe as it could possibly be. But I also understand that, like, this is technology and holes happen. Yeah. And so if it happens to your product, just tell me. Just say, hey, this thing happened. We discovered it. We patched it. Face the fire now versus later, 3 years later, because I guarantee you the response is going to be way greater 3 years later than it would if you just
Yeah,
Admit it.
that I get, but at the same time, maybe there's also a group of consumers that says, "Oh man, you had a flaw in this security, and you just now told me 1 month later. That's the bridge too far," and
Right.
they leave. I don't know. I've seen a bit of that too. People are a bit extreme,
No question, it happens.
when it comes to stuff. So maybe that's why they're so tempered on how they approach this stuff. I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish it was something that all of us as consumers would be better with, far as the security of all of our different connected devices.
For sure.
It's too common for this stuff to happen. I mean, we just got finished talking about basically being phished, and it seems like that stuff is just continuing to happen more and more and more and more. And you're thinking, phishing is old news, and it's still happening?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So
totally. There's still people to fall for it, I suppose. You know what I mean? And there probably always will be. There's just so many people on the planet using
I wish we were
technology.
wrong.
There's always a sea of people to take advantage of, unfortunately.
I wish we were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.